Hey friends, welcome back to Checkbox Heather. I have a treat for you because we have another interview this week. I know our plan was to do them every other week, but I was just so excited we had to do two in a row. So you had Lucia last week, and this week you have Rhonda Khan. Rhonda is amazing. She is the CEO of Simply Speech Solutions, and she is an expert public speaking coach for any of you that are thinking about public speaking or have stage fright or get nervous or have this urge to share your story and you don't know how. You have a TED Talk in your future, or you just want the ability to be able to share your stories, whether at work or in your life with your family and friends more effectively, Rhonda is your go-to. She does this wonderful incubator called the Catalyst Academy, where she works with women of color to really amplify and step into their power through their storytelling, through using their voice on a public speaking stage, helps you structure and create an entire business around public speaking. So if that is for you and you're a woman of color just like me, step into this space. Rhonda is your go-to for sure. We talk about so many incredible things in this episode because not only is she a one-on-one coach, but she also does workshops for people as well. And so much of her work is based in her background and so much of the experience she's had. So she was a speech language pathologist coming out of school. She's also an actor and a playwright. And so there's so many really cool things that we talk about in this episode. And I don't want to tell you all of them up front, but let me just say, we talk about so many different parts of identity. And so one of the things that I encourage you as you are listening to this episode is to think about how the aspects of your identity are intersecting right now, and there's an interplay happening because we're in a time right now where there's so many different elements being asked of us, so many different things that we're being asked to tap into, so many feelings that some of us have never felt before. If you have felt some version of this in the past, it's bringing up old stuff. And so I encourage you to think about how that stuff's coming up and coming through and coming about. We talk so much in this episode about healing and transformation and how healing and transformation is literally the human condition. So think about how, as we're talking about these things, whether you do share the identity buckets we're talking about or not, how these things, how these experiences resonate with you, how they might be showing up specifically right now a little bit differently because we are in this phase heading out of summer into fall of 2021 with the uncertainty around COVID-19 and the variants that we have in vaccinations and so often when we're in this state of uncertainty and limbo, so many different things start popping up for us individually. And we're seeing that show up in so many weird ways. We're seeing it show up in people mistreating people in restaurants. We're seeing it in people freaking out on airplanes. We're seeing it in the way that we're interacting with each other in our relationships. We're seeing it, and we have been seeing it through COVID, but as relationships and marriages are breaking apart, as friendships are now being redefined, as our relationship with our work and people are leaving their jobs, this great resignation is a very real thing. So I encourage you, as you're listening to this episode, think about the things that we're talking about and how it's mapping to your life and how you might be able to take some moment in time to think about how can I heal, take care of, and transform myself from this state that I am right now, because we are, again, always healing, always transforming, and always changing in these times. So I really encourage you to get to know yourself as you're listening to this, and hopefully, again, you'll hear this from both of us, but we both use our story, we both use our time on the microphone to really try to help impact and create space for other people to feel as though and know that their stories are important. So I am so excited for you to get to know Rhonda. Simply Speech Solutions. At the end of this, we've got all the ways for you to follow her, but I really, really encourage you to just plan to make a new friend today. All right, my friends, enjoy. Hi, Rhonda. Welcome to Checkbox Other. I'm so happy you're here.
Hi, Nikki. Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor. It is.
Just so you all know, before we even started recording, we talked for a while, and so we had to stop because we were going to talk about all the things. And I was like, wait, people are going to want to hear this.
Yep.
Yeah. So you're in for a treat, everybody. So Rhonda, the first thing that I always have everybody kind of start with is give us your take on your journey, the twists, the turns, the aha moments that have led you to where you are today.
Oh, well, I'll give a theme to it. And I guess the theme is always evolving, always listening, always trying to trust myself. And that means a lot of change. So as it is today, I'm a public speaking coach that specializes in amplifying the voices of women of color. And I do this many ways. I have a public program called the Catalyst Academy. It's an incubator for public speaking for a thought leader. I don't like that word, but trailblazing women And then I speak and train with companies. I have a podcast, Oversharing with Rhonda. But before that, I have been a speech language pathologist for many years. I've been a working actor. I had a one-woman show. And really the transition to some of the things I do now had to do with motherhood and becoming a mom about actually 5 years ago from Friday, because my son just turned 5. And so years ago, becoming a mom and realizing that I needed to make some shifts and life changes. And so I stumbled upon the journey of entrepreneurship, not ever thinking that I would be one, not ever thinking that I wanted to. And I've learned a lot along the way. And now I think where I am is really trying to expand and elevate what I do, even beyond public speaking. Public speaking is what, I'm known for. But it's only one branch of my tree. So I look forward to like elevating my mission even further and growing.
Oh, I got chills from all those things. From your theme, I was like, this is, again, everybody listening, I told you, I'm covered in chills from top to bottom at this point, and we've just started with the first question. It wasn't even a question. Tell me about you, and I'm like crying over here.
Let's cry. I'm ready. Let's plans.
I'm here for it. All right. So the main question that I ask people, hence the name of the podcast, is, can you share a time where you have felt other or different, or as though you don't belong? And if you have more than one, they are all welcome here.
Yeah, I mean, I do have more than one. I had one that I thought of beforehand. I feel like I've always felt different. I think I grew up in a very homogenous area. I'm from Chicago. I'm from the South Side of Chicago. If y'all don't know, that's real Black. And so I did have, in a way, the blessing of growing up with people who look like me. But if you don't know this, Chicago is a very segregated city. And so that means a lot with systemic and cultural racism. And I don't get into it. But I think that I've always felt like, different. So I don't know if y'all are Enneagram folks here. I bet you are, Nikki. I bet you're an Enneagram folk. And so recently I discovered I'm a 4, and I don't like sharing with people because I'm like, I don't like being a 4. I don't think you understand me, but that's literally what a 4 is. It's like, you're always misunderstanding me. I'm so creative. I'm so feelings, but that's who I am. And so, growing up a sensitive little Black girl that's awkward. Like I was the original awkward Black girl and awkward in glasses. I can't jump double dutch. I don't know how to skate. I couldn't turn. They told me I was double-handed. So like I've had that feeling in life. I've recently like deeply embraced that. But I think a specific time was college, because growing up even though I felt different, I still got to see people who looked like me, talked like me, acted like me. And then I went to a predominantly white institution. It's the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. And, Big Ten, for those of you who know those kinds of big research one, also big sports kind of schools. And while it was diverse in representation, like we had lots of different things, the Midwest can be very, very segregated. And when I went to class, I would be the only Black person. And so we would be in these big lectures. And this is, I know, a lot of people's experience going to PWIs, but I'd be, that. And it was like such a shock from what I had grown up with. And that it was all this, I'm 39. And so we didn't use words like microaggression in the early 2000s. And so I didn't know these types of things that I was experiencing from white people. And like, and even, sometimes other groups of like, why are they making fun of how what is this? Or why is the professor treated? I mean, I knew racism, I experienced it, but it was just like so much. And I feel like I wish, I'm glad I experienced what I experienced because I learned a lot from it, even though I didn't think I had to. But I wish that I was like one of these Gen Z kids now growing up now, because I could be like, microaggression, blah, blah, blah. Like they know, they have the lexicon. But like, I feel like those of us who are that age just kind of absorbed it and didn't know really how to process it. And I know that I had sent on a journey through my adulthood, really trying to unravel some of like the, and I think this word is overused, but dare I say trauma from, being in that environment and not really knowing or being able to articulate, and people weren't holding themselves accountable either for that kind of like that. So it was like a big shock, being in that. Yeah.
For sure. Well, yes. I mean, again, those of you can't see, I'm nodding my head so vigorously and trying to keep myself together over here, because so much of what we've experienced, and it's so funny, you said the early 2000s. I mean, 2010s, and even up until when we were together in 2020, we saw each other in March of 2020, the last the last hurrah. Ron and I were on a plane from California to New York together, trying to get out of one hotspot into another hotspot.
And I almost missed my flight. You remember that?
Do I remember that? The amount of anxiety I had messaging you on Instagram. I'm like, they're calling your name. Do you want me to go tell them anything about you? Oh God, I'm feeling that in my body right now too. I'm so glad you made the flight. You made it home. Yep. Yes. But it's so interesting because I actually last week did a talk on Zoom with a racial justice ministry. Mm-hmm. So a church that had been, it's predominantly white and predominantly older. So I would say like the youngest folks there were about 60. And so, yeah, so it's the church that my father goes to. And I've been going to their racial justice ministry as like a space to hear and talk about all that's been going on for the last year and a half. And it's, 15 minutes from where I grew up. And also my dad had lived there for a while. So it was familiar. Anyway, long-winded reason, not the point. But one of the things I was talking about with them, because a lot of the conversation has been about like super historical past racism, to the point where we're like talking about slaves in Connecticut as the point of conversation, which, okay, important to know, but also let's talk about today. And so I actually spent a lot of that time sharing stories of that experience of feeling like all these little, what we now use the word microaggression, which you didn't like thought leadership. I don't like microaggression because I feel like it makes it sound much smaller than what it really is.
It's not micro. Yeah.
No, there's nothing micro about them. But I shared a bunch of stories that were what we would call an accumulation of microaggression over time that was happening in the incubator of colorblindness. That was the conversation about race for our generation growing up, that we're like, we don't see color, everything's fine. If it's not really about race, if it's about race, like, look at the progress we've made. So therefore racism isn't the thing. Yes. Martin Luther King happened in the 60s. Yes. And so we're good in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. And one of the pieces that came through so significantly as I was kind of preparing, and I really intentionally was trying to be more organic with these stories, was that even as the only in these rooms experiencing these things, though in your gut, it's something that you can't necessarily talk to or give a language to with the people around you. When it happens so much over time, you start internalizing it as something flawed about you as the individual, because you are the only person experiencing in that room. And so to even just think about you in a room of, I'm just thinking, I went to a smaller college, but like these big classrooms and you being the only feeling all of this stuff and feeling it in ways that like everybody around you doesn't even see, it is not even a blip on their radar, don't even know what's coming out of their mouth. It's so automatic that you have to carry so much weight of that room at the same time of like trying to navigate all of these. What I like to see, microaggressions, when they talk about them, are like paper cuts. And I'm like, no, those are, they're more like punches in the face. And so just imagine that you're getting punched in the face everywhere. And then also getting socked in the stomach. Yeah. So you can't breathe, can't see. And you're also supposed to then coach and make other people around you feel okay that that's happening. So that's, as you were saying that, I'm like, that's why chills were happening everywhere. Cause I'm like, I want to go back and hug Rhonda. I want to sit right next to her and just be like, hey, you're not alone in this. This is crazy. Yes, there aren't words for this right now. And also hopefully in 20 years, we'll be in a spot where we're actually at least talking about these things. Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
It's so important. And again, as you're talking about Gen Zers, yes, Gen Z. So I also have a sister that's 11 years younger than me, a brother that's 13, and another brother that's 15 years younger. So I have Gen Z like people in my life. And it's so interesting to watch how easy it is for them to have talked about race from a very young age. They grew up, again, 15 minutes from where I did. It was much more racially diverse. So there was conversations in general. Yeah. But the level, like the ability to walk out of your classroom to stand for something and it be like, oh, schools will just let that happen. Like that wasn't an option. No. It wasn't even part of the playbook that we knew we could even talk to, because we had to fall in line. Yeah. And we had to do things right. So we could be anything we wanted to be within the confines of the options that were presented.
Yeah. Yeah. There was so much erasure back then. It was about erasure, like that whole color blindness piece. I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's just like we all, what I got really frustrated with around 2016 and the election, all this other stuff, was that our generation, I think, was fed this lie of diversity that was about, hey, we can all just accept each other's differences, celebrate our differences, love each other. We're all the same, really. And even the progressive of that is like, I want to learn more about you and this or that, instead of like really acknowledging like there is systemic hate, racism, I am always going to look at you this way no matter what, not because I want to, but just because that's what the system says. And I don't even realize it. Yes. And nobody was talking about it. And I feel like there was like in these past decade or so, even more of like, the curtain has been raised and like, this was the lie. And so I feel like I don't know, I'll speak for myself. Like, I feel resentful of that time because I'm just like, y'all were lying. And now I'm just dealing with trauma that I didn't even know I had, like how you felt it when I was talking. Oh, yeah. Because I'm like, what would it have been if we were able to have that language and that space to feel like we could walk out like your siblings do?
Yeah. And it's so interesting because I'm not going to remember the acronym, but it's so interesting how the expression around trauma has extended to include a lot more than originally thought, because it wasn't necessarily inclusive of people's experiences, and understanding that racism itself in a country that is built and founded upon the principles of racism and the systems and structures that we're all around are upheld with a dynamic of white supremacy that, at least in my brain, it's the thing that's so funny about what happens when we all use words. I mean, again, somebody that loves language, is that, the word trauma has been used and has been diluted, but also it's been so shut away for so long and so taboo and so vilified that I'm glad that it's something that we're able to acknowledge. Because I mean, if nothing else, we've all gone through the collective trauma of the last year and a half. And so how do we as human beings allow ourselves to acknowledge that trauma is something that informs the way that we act and the way that we connect with one another? So I think that that's super important. The other part that I think is so interesting, that I think is so interesting is the idea, what I was hearing in the front end of that was kind of this idea of exceptionalism, that like, okay, we've seen a couple different people be okay outside of the box, so we're good. And now we need to operate as though we don't want to rock the boat here, because we've had some success and we've had some inclusion. If we rock the boat, will we lose the progress we've had? And instead, I mean, very, very obviously, we're seeing that so much that wasn't necessarily documented like it is now was happening all the way through and undermining what, one or two spotlit versions of progress looked like from a racial perspective, from a gender perspective, from any kind of representation perspective. It was like using, like, people like, oh, well, Oprah made it. So it's like, okay, the exceptionalism of Oprah, the exceptionalism of Barack Obama. Yes. And also look at what their experiences are relative to anybody at the same level.
At that level.
Right. So the interesting part of that is like, how do we acknowledge, yes, there has been progress made, and also the systems are still the same, and the systems are still making it difficult for that progress to be sustained, and also for people to step into that space. And then also with us as millennials, a big part of what I do is around generational stuff. I actually think generational diversity is really important, and the shift that we're having with regard to power is a huge part of this generational shift. That the millennial generation, in order to be such a wonderful bridge, had to experience that like erasure and that numbing and that how to fall in line in order to be able to translate what has been happening to what is happening now, and allow the space for Gen Zers to come in and like, come in yelling, screaming, and walking out. Because without that, there isn't the ability for there to be a connection made, for us to actually have policy shift and change, which I hope is going to be, the reality of what we're experiencing, as more and more people are like, hold on, wait a second. I was taught from the beginning that this shouldn't be the way things are. Now I'm seeing that it is. How can I do something about it? How can I use my voice? And also, how can if I haven't felt supported from the people before me, the generations before me, how can I be supportive to those behind me? And so, yes, I think there's a, why couldn't I have had it that easy? Or I say to my brother, I'm like, you're so lucky that you get to like go out and while out a little bit. Cause like, I couldn't do any of that, but also enjoy life, please. I don't want you to have to go through the crap that I went through. I want you to enjoy things.
Right.
And so the difference between the ability to also honor both sides of it and honor the fact that like without our experience, the Gen Z walkout doesn't happen. Without the girded support of the millennial generation is the largest generation in our country right now, is stepping into the most power, unfortunately has a fraction of wealth. But like that, I think bolsters us at this point. We have been taught that like when past your 20s, whatever if you haven't done anything past your 20s, I mean, you could do the rest. And now we're like, we're in our 30s, 40s, 50s, like we're not done. We're just getting started. So
we're just getting started.
So thank you so much for the education up till now, but thank you for the microphone, and let's change the things that have been broken for generations.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. So, and let me pull this into this, because I feel like one of the things that I got so excited when I first met you, I did not know about you, is that you have a background as a speech language pathologist. My best friend growing up is a speech language pathologist. And I have like, see, chills again. Well, so much respect for that mode of healing, of transformation, of giving voice back to people that have lost it one way or another, or might not have had the opportunity to grow their voice within the systems and structures that they have, if you're a young child, for sure. So I'd love to hear about how speech language pathology has how that kind of started, how that led you to where you are, and what was I know you mentioned motherhood as a part of the kind of shift in your career. How has that background kind of moved you through this process to today?
I love this question. So I knew what I was going to major in very early. You know, sometimes people change. When I was in high school, I had this whole phase where I wanted to be a lawyer. And I was just like, look, I want to be a lawyer. I want to study law. I did debate. I was on a debate team. I was in mock trial and all those other things. And I really realized, like, I don't actually want to be a lawyer. I just want to do the dramatic stuff. I just want to do what I see on TV. But then, you know, I come from also a family of teachers, and the family of teachers, you know, I knew I didn't want to be a teacher. I mean, I knew that I'm a natural teacher. I have, like, you know, that healing teaching energy around me. Yes. And I was just like, they told me about this other field. Well, like, you still can work with kids. You're so good. You know how the elders just like tell you what you're good at and what you should do. And, you know, when you're that, you're like, okay, because you don't know who you are. And so they told me about this field of speech pathology, which involves, yes, still working with kids and potentially in an educational setting, but more freedom and just ways. And I was just like, oh, that is so fascinating that you can, you know, the way somebody communicates really can make and shape a lot in their future, and a limitation to that can be really devastating. And I remember, I think it was a coworker of mine or a coworker of a friend. I can't remember. That's how I'm moving across my millennial growth age and journey, generational. But I remember she stuttered, and I remember being like, you know, seeing how that limited that person. I was just like, wow, I want to help people with that. I want to help people feel better. And so, like, I started in schools. I did, I still love children. The only reason I don't work with children now, well, I'm doing entrepreneurship, but like having my own child, I already knew, I was like, okay, I'm done with other people's kids. No,
you're working with children.
Kids. But like my, you know, this, I knew he is a lot. I haven't actually seen children in a clinical way in like 3 years at this point. But I really loved seeing the transformation. That's what I've always been connected to. And that's kind of been the thread throughout all of my work. And so what actually happened prior to the whole pregnancy, motherhood situation was I was doing, you know, there's a whole conversation about theater. I'm sure you'll ask about that. I was also a working actor and a speech pathologist at the same time. So my first job, which is, you probably know from your BFF, you have a clinical fellowship year where you work and you get supervised. So my clinical fellowship year, I was doing non-union plays, and it's always been together. And then I quit my speech pathology to do acting. Then I came back to it. It was like a back and forth kind of thing. I did my show, but in Manhattan, I live in New York. There, I got into this corporate speaking firm. It was she was hiring instructors to do accent modification, which I now think is problematic and not aligned with me. Another conversation for another day. And corporate speaking, and people who wanted to be better at this or that. And again, I was still attached to the transformation, but I was working for an entrepreneur. And I was like, hey, this isn't that hard. Like, I can actually do this and do it my way. And so when the time came for me to step into entrepreneurship, once I became a mother and I was stay-at-home mom unplanned. And I knew that unplanned meaning because, and I always skip over this part because it's always long, but let's go ahead and tell it. I had a pregnancy complication that put me on bed rest, had me lose most of my jobs because we weren't Zoom savvy at the time. And then, New York rent is expensive as far as childcare and everything else. So I decided to stay home with my son. And I was like, well, I have nothing to lose. I might as well combine my theater, my speech pathology. I'm artistic and I'm clinical and all of that, and try to do public speaking coaching. Why not? And I saw my boss did it, who I didn't like her business, but I saw that. So why don't I create my own thing? And that's kind of how it came about. But it was always, just like with speech pathology, it's always about the transformation and seeing how words and I don't know, like realizing your power and your potential can change things, and whether it changes your communication, whether it changes the choices you make. And that's always been the part that I've been invested in the most.
Yes. I have no idea why this just came to me, but there's so much healing in witnessing yourself transform, but also in witnessing the potential and possibility for transformation and seeing it in other people. One of the things that this might seem like out of left field, but Apple TV, Apple Plus, whatever, they have a documentary. It's about, 60, 90 minutes long. It's documenting the world when the humans were out of it. It's like when the humans left or something like that. It's what's called. And they were documenting different places all around the world that once we were, in isolation and quarantine out of nature, what nature did to heal itself. Oh. And watching that, I cried so much watching that, because you can watch how when we create a space where there's not harm, and we create a space where we can heal as human beings, as living beings, that transformation is amazing when you remove the obstacles, or you normalize the fact that those obstacles are there, to give people the opportunity to speak in their, in their way, not speaking because, as you're talking about the accent modification piece, right? Yes, I understand. My father was born in Haiti, came here when he was, I think he was like 15. And so has a very, very significant accent. And it's so funny because people meet him and I'm always like, oh yeah, I forgot that he has an accent. I would never want my dad to change the way he speaks. And also our country very much wants you to rid any accent of, even if it's an accent from within America, can you just remove that to be more palatable? And so the interesting part of watching, again, like you're talking about the evolution, even in the last few years since 2016, and hopefully, my hope is that in the next 10 years, we will be looking back right now and be like, remember how stunted we were in 2021? And so thank goodness we're so much further along now.
Yes.
But the ability for us to create space for healing transformation to happen, and not transformation for transformation's sake, to fit in that kind of homogenized robotic mode.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm so glad you do this, because again, I think that when you talk to entrepreneurs, it's so interesting too about what are you bringing from your past to create your present, to build for the future that you want. And one of my favorite things is I would prefer to have all of these, oh my goodness, you did that. Oh my goodness, all these things that don't necessarily feel like the plotted path, or the obviously this is where the kind of doctor lawyer path, as you're talking about. I wanted to be a lawyer too in school.
And
then I was like, no, I don't, I'm a good arguer. I don't really want to do that every day.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's just so interesting to think about how it wasn't just the speech pathology and healing part, but also the acting and so I want to hear I want to definitely hear a lot more about your acting experience, and also not just an actor, you, not only do you do it, but you then create a one-woman show, right? Create, perform, just put that all out there. So tell us about that part of your journey and how that has just I didn't know this about you until I was doing research, and I was like, Rhonda, come on, we hang out all the time.
Girl. Yeah. Okay. So which part, where do you want me to enter? Do you want me to talk about acting? Do you want me to talk about my show, or
I
how?
mean, to me, they flow together. So start wherever feels the most kind of organic place to start for you.
So as I was just mentioning, always, I've always been a creative performer. I come from creative parents. I was always doing it extracurricularly and throughout time. And I actually wanted to get an MFA in acting instead of getting my master's in speech pathology. Oh. And my mom, she talked me out of it. And she was just like, your trajectory will change. And I'm like, all right. So I didn't. But as soon as I graduated, I was like, where are the auditions at? And so it's always very much been, the stage is one of my homes. Creativity is my home, but the stage is my home, and the home, and that's very aligned with me being a speaker and teaching speaking. But I think I went all in. Like when I left after 3 years of being a school speech pathologist. I got into an actor conservatory, a very good summer one in Chicago, and Steppenwolf Theater, and I just went all the way in. I did a commercial, I got agent, I did a lot of performing. And what I found was I love the craft. I do not like the industry, or do not feel like the industry is aligned with me, because they don't tell you that your whole life is auditioning and letting people choose you. Yes. And the way my whole values is set up, even though I know there's a way to make it powerful and fun, it was really hard for me because rejection is so hard, and it's nothing but that. Like no actor is downplaying that. Like that is the job. And so it just became too much. I took a break. I went back to work. I got into, this is like how alignment works. One summer, I had all these feelings about my relationship with food. And it just kind of came out, and I was just like, my way, I'm a very do what I feel, grab my laptop, start writing. Didn't make any sense. Just writing, like a character's monologue would come out, and like a conversation would come out, and I write, I close the laptop, close my laptop. Didn't know what it was. Got invited to this artist retreat in Costa Rica. This is 2014. And I said yes. And back then we weren't about that invest in yourself life, how we all getting coaching, and I'm coaching, and we were just like, what, spend money on what? But I did this actors retreat, and it was about really connecting with the craft and the art of just being creative versus like everything I needed at the time. Cause I was just like, industry. So we had to do what's called a Genesis project. And that was just to create something, like make it the beginning of something. And it didn't have to be like no production, no polish, just create it. And so I brought these writings that didn't make sense down to this retreat. And I just started to put it together into something theatrical, because the last day we had to present it to the group. And it was about like 15 of us or so. And so I have people read, I present this thing, and, there are people in tears. There are people like, Rhonda, you need to do this. You have to do this. You as a Black woman have to do this. I was the only Black woman there, by the way. That's a whole other conversation. Only person of color, that's a whole other conversation. But they're like, you need to do this because people need to hear this from you. And so I said, okay. What I did when I got back, I was just like, the only way I'm going to finish this is if I have a deadline, because deadlines will anchor me, because otherwise I'll be in an ethereal creative world. And so I did not an actors retreat. Sorry. I found a one-person show festival called the United Solo Theater Festival in New York, which this day is the biggest solo theater festival in the country, so cool. I think in the world. And I just submitted my little show. I decided it was going to be a solo show. It was, not perfect, but I submitted it, and I was like, yeah, whatever. Then I got in. And then I was like, oh, I got in. And so then I had to get a director. I had to get it together. And then I premiered my show in October of 2015. It's called Food in New York in an off-Broadway theater. Never produced my own work. And it was received very, very well. And I ended up touring it. I toured a couple touring, meaning I performed it at my alma mater. I performed at an LA Theater Festival, performed it again in New York. And then, I got pregnant. That's a whole other story. But that is how that journey happened. And it was my way to take my power back as an artist, because acting is the only career that one of the few that people have to choose you to do your art. And what I did with the solo show, what I was very grateful to be able to be like, you don't have to choose me. I can create this for myself and choose myself and decide when you get to see me and get to see my story and when you don't. And so it's, again, one of the bravest things, one of the scariest things, one of the most healing things for me. We talk about healing, and a reminder that this is something that I and anybody can do should they have a story in their heart that they need to share.
Whew. Yes, 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 yes. 100%, all the way. Yes. There's so many pieces to this. There's a part of me that's like, there's so many pieces, there's so many threads on this that are like gems, are like transformational, life-changing stuff for people. One of the pieces that I love so much was you were so pulled to write things down and we're like, I don't know where this is going. I don't know the purpose, but I need to document and get this out of me. And then trusting that was fertile soil to build from and bring to a space that you're like, I'm not actually sure exactly what this is. Again, the industry that we are in now was not then what it is now. And to really, I mean, not only, I think the beauty of this too is like to choose yourself when you're going into places that people are like, have the decision on whether or not you fit and or are good at what you're doing. You're like, I am good. I know I'm good. I'm great. I'm wonderful. And also this story needs to be told, right? So it's not even just you, it's what stories get to even get past the door to then be selected for people to come act within them. And the ability to bring these stories to the forefront is so important. I'm also so intrigued of just like again, there just feels like so much like birthing that came out of this, of like coming from this idea and bringing out this entire end package of like, here's this wonderful story. And yes, tour it. I tell you about tour it. I don't know about tour it. Yes, tour it around so people can hear and see and be witness to the amazingness that came out of your mind. I mean, that's, again, one of my cousins is an actress. She's in New York as well. And we've actually talked a lot about the experience of rejection and how that is like, that's built, like I worked in corporate, right? I can't imagine going to work every day and being, not necessarily being paid, right? Doing my job, not getting paid, not getting selected, and being pulled, poked, and prodded about my ability to be somebody else. I'm not even being myself necessarily when I'm acting, how that would play itself out. So I'm just so interested about how that all plays out. Also, the resilience with which you need to have to be able to keep getting back up is incredible. And so what do you feel like was from your one woman play, what was the thing that kind of stuck out, surprised you, or resonated most with audiences?
So I think that I shared a lot about my mental health, and to put it plainly, what you're seeing a Black woman tell a story, take you through her life. You're seeing her do it via hip hop lyrics, sometimes multimedia. It was, it's a fun show, but you realize that you're learning about the interior world of her mental health and exposing something that I think we don't talk about in our community as Black people, about like A, mental health, B, disordered eating, and body acceptance, and how words and language can really affect it. And what I learned through that is to be able to say that I have an eating disorder. I can use words like recovered and stuff like that, but it's about so much more than that. And it's about realization, but like, it's a story that we don't see and hear a lot. And, 2015 was a little pre-Lizzo and a little pre when I had it come out. And it's been interesting how it's evolved now that there's so much more. Sometimes it's toxic body positivity, but we're going to get into that in another conversation. But it was also just the body acceptance movement has just like increased. Yes. But at the same time, we are still struggling with that, with stuff, with food, with our relationship with food, with how we manage mental health. And so you get to see a Black woman going to therapy and going to multiple therapists, and you get to see like sometimes me talking about some of the darkest moments, and you also get to laugh and have a lot of fun and be characters. And so with all of that, I think there's a lot of normalizing that happened in the show. A lot of people of all walks of life said they saw themselves in my story. Of course, the Black women and women of color were like, girl, like I always get, this, you spoke to me, like I always get that so much from that. But there's even beyond that, I get guys and people, because these are things that we have all experienced on some level, or even if it's not eating, it's, addiction, or it's, depression, like all the stuff that's there, and putting a voice to it. And you literally don't, I am intentionally, like I'm kind of spoiling it now, but like intentionally, I don't say these things outside of the play, because I want you to think that you're seeing, I want you to see how normal this is, and how things can unravel, and how things can come back together. And I take you all the way. Like we go all the way. I'm not afraid of darkness and scary emotions. And so we go there, but that's what people, I think, needed to see, because they've also been there too with me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking us there just now. I mean,
hey,
and I'll go all the way, wherever it is. Let me know. I'll
let's
come back to California with you. Or I can come to New York's not that far. So, you speak a lot about so many different dynamics of oppressive systems. I mean, that's what I heard through line of so much, right? Our body image issues, our shame around mental health, our ability to actually love, care for, and nourish ourselves, whatever that looks like, whether that's through food or otherwise. The addiction, like I think of like the addiction we have to what our bodies are supposed to look like. And that's kind of the male female dynamic. Women are, women, you can't love your bodies, and men, you can't really love your bodies either. And anybody in between, my goodness, if you don't identify as hyper of either, and you don't fit, you don't belong. And so the idea of having to kind of navigate the realities of the things that are fed to us before we even know that we're consuming messages and language, and how much that impacts is it's so powerful, so impactful. But also the fact that so often when we're talking about these buckets of our identity, we talk about them separately. And inherently they're intertwined. They're intertwined in every aspect of how we show up every day. You pull one, it's like a web. You pull one part, the whole web moves with it. And so having the ability and the willingness and the generosity to welcome people into that experience, and to feel seen, even if there's nothing outwardly that they're like, oh yeah, we're the same, is such, again, the transformational gift that you're bringing to the party. And it seems like every single thing you do. So I'd love to hear about a little bit more about kind of, I know you talk about neurodiversity, you talk about ADHD, really normalize conversations about how we show up.
All the stuff out today.
Well, because I
missed nothing. You have not missed, Nikki.
I study. I do my stalking well. And I am fascinated by, and also like one of the things, so ADHD, I remember growing up, it was such a normal conversation that every kid had ADHD and was on Ritalin. Like I remember that so vividly as a kid, and being at school and people talking about that. And now realizing that like no systems or structures within our school actually shifted or changed. We just medicated. And now we have an entire group of people that have been diagnosed from a very young age. And a lot of times, and not to minimize ADHD, a lot of times I've watched a documentary about this. A lot of times it was this kid was acting out, and so let's diagnose, medicate, and suppress. And so the relationship we have to actually acknowledging neurodiversity, the way that we process, the way that we consume, the systems, structures, and situations that we're in that actually allow us to be curious, to allow us to have our energy fluctuate, to allow us to focus or to dream, the creative. Our systems aren't set up for the creative to thrive. You need to be within a certain time limit. You need to be able to show up. You need to be tested in a very specific way to achieve. And now we have an entire population of adults that have had that kind of language and messaging and medication at a very young age, and are in these workplaces that haven't really shifted either, that are just an evolution of the same within these time structures, within these places, and within the acceptable ways of showing up. So I'd love to hear kind of your experience with ADHD coming to the forefront and how you're talking about it. I know you're out here talking in the world about something that I feel like was talked about when I was younger, but definitely isn't as normalized, or even there's not conversation about.
all of that. I'm just processing. Well, what's funny is I think within a month or two ago, we could check this out. The New York Times published an article about Black women and ADHD. So check it out, because just the intersections of that. And I think for me, I was diagnosed as an adult. So there's a whole other conversation. I do remember ADHD being talked about. And I think more so in my teenage years, when my teenage years were like, the mid late 90s. And then, I was in college and I didn't have the circles of friends who abused Ritalin and Adderall, maybe because they were abusing other things, but like not my circles of friends, but like folks I knew.
People around,
but like, but it was such a common thing. And so I'm very curious what kind of socioeconomic situations are in place that it is, because that was not the same. But once I learned about ADHD, I kind of thought I had it, but that's kind of a thing we think anyway, when we learn like, oh, I got bipolar, I got this, I got that. That sounds like me. But I kind of knew, but I didn't actually go to get a formal diagnosis until 29, which was 10 years ago at this point. And so there's been a lot of shifts now, knowing, but there's something unique that happens when you get diagnosed later in life, because all of those quirks and things that you thought that are ADHD, you actually thought were you. And so there's a lot of shame that comes with that. And so again, the buckets, right, that you talked about of identity, of like, what is a Black woman supposed to be? Have it together, have it all, be the one, be the super, all this bull, stuff that we don't believe, but like is put into us. Like, what is a Black woman? Is you got to be smart, you got to be better, you got to you good student. And a lot of things associated with this particular disorder are against that. You know what I mean? There's disorganization. There is, the lack of control. There is impulsivity. There is, if you're a perfectionist and you got ADHD, it is torture. I'm one of them. It is torture because you will never fit society's expectation of that. Plus you being a Black woman and people thinking you can never mess up, and messing up is a part of having ADHD. So it is like, for me, after, 10 years in, and there's a whole period of like, wow, this is what was wrong. It wasn't me. And then you tell people, and they're like, wow, this makes sense. But then there's a gap of like, nothing is done.
Yeah.
Like, well, thank you for sharing that with me. And so like, there's a resentment that I have a complicated relationship with ADHD, because while I believe it's explanation, it's not an excuse, but it's also like, there's no systems adjusted once I found out.
Right.
And so the work became on me to do my own acceptance work, which I'm still doing, to modify my, for the people who are around me and the work that I do. It's great that I work for myself, girl. Rhonda couldn't have been in nobody corporate America, because listen, but like, there's all these layers of like stuff you need. Now there are communities. We talk about neurodiversity way more now. Companies are starting to, there are a lot of people, there's a woman, her name is Margot Jaffe. Margot is, I think, top, I forgot her position. Sorry, Margot, if you listen to this, girl, I forgot your position, but she's like in accessibility. She's a big neurodiversity and champion of diversity rights for folks. And she also has a platform called Kaleidoscope Society that features women with ADHD. There's communities of Black women who have it, because now it's just like, this was what was wrong, but it's or not even wrong, but like, at least that's how we felt. And so there's stuff happening, but I don't know, to your point when we were talking earlier about like what's available now, but like, I'm still not healed from, calling me ditzy or airhead in school, right? Or, or me being resentful, and me, like, I still remember you saying that as you congratulate me on my business and all my things. I still remember you called me that. I still remember you called me slow. And my brain just works different. And, and then there's the nasty side of me that's like, well, back then they didn't work, like that whole vibe. But like, it's been a process of just, me kind of have to work toward like acceptance and honoring of like, this is how it goes for me. Like, this is what it is. And it's a journey. That's what I can say.
Yeah. And thank you. It's so interesting, because I feel like normalizing the conversation, bringing awareness to the realities of what these, again, acronyms, these words that we tend to hear or have heard and have an association with at a certain time in our life, or have one person in our lives that is the embodiment of the experience of that one thing. So like for ADHD, for me, it's very specific human beings that I remember, but it's not representative. Just like every Black woman isn't the same. Just like everybody is not the same. We're all unique. We all have fingerprints for a reason,
Yes.
like we are not the same just because we share one piece of identity. And also the fact that we have such a shallow pool of research and understanding from a scientific perspective, if we're not including people in the scientific and medical processes to be understanding and knowing what's going on and thinking that there's something wrong, flawed, and dysfunctional about them when it's really not. It's the fact that you're a person, and again, the system structures that you've been operating within and the levels of success metrics, right? Somebody calling you ditzy and slow. What is that? That's relative to something else. That's not just its own thing. So what are you comparing it to? What are you seeing as what perfection is? And does anybody actually meet that? No. Are you projecting your own discomfort and your own discomfort around your pace on someone else? Because why are you bringing that to the party? There's no need except for you to feel better, And so the thing about this is, yes, this happens as kids. Yes, it also happens as adults. This is where that microaggression / not micro comes back into the party. And it's like, if we're so over-indexed on paying attention to what other people are doing that make us feel some sort of inadequacy in ourselves, that we need to then project it all over them. How do we own our experience to be like, okay, I'm feeling uncomfortable. Let me deal with that rather than let me feel uncomfortable and project it all over someone else. And so the ability to take that time and space and honor, okay, there's nothing wrong with me. It's just that I'm different than what I've been told is normal. And there is no real normal. How we actually create space for people to be able to exist as themselves and succeed and thrive, and not necessarily say you have to be exactly like me in order to be okay. So it's so interesting to hear how even just like the journey of healing, and I don't know if this is helpful or not, but I feel like one of the things as we start discovering these aspects about ourselves is we're not trying to get to a goalpost. There's no like healed, there's no end zone. Like it's a constant journey of creating and understanding a life that allows you to be more yourself with a whole bunch of outside messaging telling you to do the opposite. Especially if you're in multiple non-dominant identities, so much messaging is telling you to change who you are to be accepted. And so creating that buffer between the messages and your own relationship with yourself to actually allow for that healing to happen and show up stronger is so important. And stronger, right? Again, this is the superwoman vibe. What does stronger look like? Stronger to me doesn't look like I'm going to I'm not going to be beating my chest. I'm not going to be uber masculine in order to be strong. It's this knowing and ability to honor and acknowledge, as you're talking about the empowerment of being able to be an entrepreneur and create your own space of working and not going into a corporate space that tells you how you work effectively, honoring the fact that like, here's what my work environment looks like that works well for me. It might not work well for you, and that's okay. To me, that's more strength than give me the microphone, let me tell you everything, and let me dictate how you all need to operate. The ability to own your space and to take up space is so important.
Yeah.
So, okay, talk to me, because it's funny, I like pull these questions together and I don't know that my brain knows that it's going in a path. And it's kind of like when you're talking about like, when you're writing the plan, I'm like, oh, okay. So tell me a little bit more about the Catalyst Academy, because I do feel like one of the aspects of what you're doing in creating space for people to really tap into their vulnerabilities and their voice and creating a space for their stories to be heard is like so much of all of the aspects of what I feel like it's a cascading process right now where it's kind of landing in this spot that you've created. So can you talk a little bit more about the Catalyst Academy and like how that has shown up both for you in your healing, but also how it's created a space and who comes to that space and what's been happening there? Because I know don't worry, I watch your stuff. I'm like, again, creepy stalker on all the things and all the wonderful things you're doing.
Well, listen, Nikki, I'm that too. So we're so aligned. The Catalyst Academy is, the way we discuss it is a public speaking incubator for women of color who want to grow their thought leadership through public speaking. And so the idea is that you have this mission that is beyond you, right? The mission to heal, serve, transform, disrupt, whatever it may be in whatever community you want to, or systems you want to do. But that public speaking is a big part of that journey and a vehicle that you need to elevate this platform so you can do the work that you need to do. And it is an incubator in that it takes time, it takes community, it takes skills, it takes mindset, it takes all of those things. And so we put all of it in a container. And it's one of my favorite containers. I love these women and I'm obsessed with them. And what we do, you get a course that you take, and it's based on my whole framework. I was just explaining this to someone in a previous meeting. My approach to public speaking is deeply intersectional and holistic, but wouldn't that make sense with everything I just told you? Mm-hmm. And so it's intersectional in that, like, there's a reason why this incubator is for women of color, because when we own our voices, it's a different conversation. When people talk about leveling up and speaking up and taking up space, we are navigating all these different things. And so what I always say is, like, I got all the tips and the tricks and the tools for you to be a powerful public speaker. But if you don't believe you belong in the room, it really doesn't matter. If you don't believe your words are worthy, then we're wasting time. And so we spend a lot of time, and it's a part of the course that you take, we spend a lot of time really like tapping through those narratives and being like, do you feel a lack of confidence because of, something, like because you just get nervous or you don't like it? Or is it because nobody made your voice feel valuable?
Yeah.
Is it because you're believing this narrative? Is it because the room that you're in is not used to looking at people like you with this level of expertise, wisdom, and leadership? And you're here. And so are you internalized? So we spend time with that. We definitely spend a lot of time with like strategic, basic facts of like, listen, this is how you build a talk. This is what you need to do. This is how you do it, but we're going to have you do it your way. And we're going to have you incorporate those unique things about you. You don't have to look outside of yourself. It's already there. Are you activating those parts? Are you dimming them? And then, listen, I say we're not the booked and busy speaking program, but we do tell you where the money resides, and there's a lot of money, as you know, in speaking. And I know some people getting it that don't need to have it. There's a lot of mediocrity, and so I'm just like, this is how you build a profitable speaking platform, and this is what you charge, and this is how you do a proposal, and this is how you get booked, and this is how you do that. So when you leave, the goal is, and there's a whole growth scale, is to be a catalyst. That's the word, that's my anti-thought leader word, to really be a catalyst. You are that agent of change. You have everything you need to grow and build and impact the folks you will. And so that's what the container provides.
Yes. So anybody that's listening to this, because I remember when I did my TED Talks back in, I don't remember what it was, 2019. I don't know time anymore.
Listen to her. Well, when I did my TED Talks, what I
trust. It was a little bit of one of those like whirlwinds of like, when was that? How did I put one foot in front of the other? Because I did 2 in 3 weeks. I did 2. Why?
That's
I don't know.
Amazing, Nikki.
It was amazing. It was also, I'll tell you this, it was too much. It was very much of like the burnout mentality. And I'm glad I did it. Proud of them. And also I would not recommend that for people.
Tim would not recommend.
Especially because, different TED, there's all different experiences. So you're managing, navigating. And it was my first kind of level at that level of like, anyway, it doesn't matter. So what I'm trying to say here is, as you're doing that, and as you're building these things out, and as I was telling people about it, everyone was like, teach me how to public speak. And I was like, oh, I can, I was like, I have my own way of like teaching you, and not teaching you to do what I did, but teaching you to think about the world so you can do what you need to do. That's at least how I do it. I try especially in the last, ever since I left corporate, and even towards the end of corporate, being like, this isn't working for me. How can I make it work and also still achieve what I need to? But it's so interesting because I think exactly how you just framed up the experience and the journey within the Catalyst Academy, it's so important to understand that like, you can learn the steps, but if you don't know yourself, those steps are going to be helpful to create kind of a more hollow experience. But you've got to understand exactly what you're bringing to the party to really activate the value and leverage those even those steps that you just said at the end. I'm like, yeah, those would be amazing. Everybody needs that. Even if you're not a public speaker, the ability to go out and share your story in a way that's effective and valued is so important. And at least for me, I've always believed, marketing in my background, that storytelling and sharing experiences, the branding of yourself and understanding that and being able to communicate that, not necessarily selling to make profit, but understanding that like your space and the space you take up is valuable. So much of that is getting to know who you are in order to, when you have that space, express what you really intentionally want to, and not express a regurgitated version of what you heard someone else say because it seemed cool.
Listen, I need to have you as a guest pastor at the church. That's literally what I preach all the time.
Yeah.
Like, it's not out there. It's in here. It's in here.
Yes. But it's scary. I mean, right? I'm not, stage fright is not a thing for me. I've been a chatty kid. I grew up with two very quiet parents and they got me. You're welcome. And so that wasn't a struggle for me. However, the struggle for me was actually in being told the way that you were supposed to do it and honoring the fact that the way that I was supposed to do it was different than when I was told and still showing up anyway. Yeah. And not necessarily having, a big part of, at least my background is very predominantly white institution, like hometown all the way through. Very much steeped in whiteness, very much steeped in quote unquote professionalism, very much steeped in keeping your vulnerability as far away from possible. And like, that's just not oversharing with Rhonda. Like I was like, oversharing with Nikki is like, hello, meet you every day. Like I am with you. When I saw that, I was like, I don't know if you remember, you put it out. I was like, yes, because I feel like there is a part of this that we are taught that by sharing it all, especially what your identity is, is oversharing, because we prefer that you were silent, small, and on the sidelines doing the work instead of being recognized for what you're doing. And so I think that there's so much beauty in creating a space to say, I can tell you how I did it, but I want you to do it your way with the support and the knowledge that I've learned. You're not alone. And also you're not going to be a carbon copy of Rhonda when you come out of this. You're going to be the version of yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So if you are, and let me say this, if you are somebody that gets stage fright, because I know that is a very common thing. I know you talk to this and create space and honor that. Can you talk a little bit about like how that shows up for people, or even like what your like top level take is on stage fright? I feel like is a big part for people.
Yeah. I mean, I think people are afraid of, it's rooted in perfectionism, and it's rooted in a fear of messiness. I think the chase of perfectionism will freeze anybody in any incarnation. So be it, I don't know what action to take in my life, so because it can't be perfect, so let me be still. And the same thing happens when you communicate, when you speak, when you do public speaking, because it's like, am I going to mess up, and how will I feel if I mess up publicly because I can't handle it? And I think what I always say, is like, you got to really own you, like we're talking about. And that's long-term work, but you can start immediately with just like, what's unique about the way I communicate? Am I a fast talker? Am I chatty Cathy? Am I a quiet? Am I a dry humor? Am I a whatever it is? Like, that's great. Let me just love that and activate that. And also knowing that there's a physical component to it, but it starts with the mental of like, learning how to ground your body, learning how to ground your voice, learning how to breathe and just like regulate yourself. And there's also a piece of knowing that it's not really about you when you speak. It's about how you're going to impact that audience every time, be it a meeting, be it a podcast interview. And so when you take the how I'm going to do out of it, that takes like 50% of the anxiety away, because it's like, what do I need to make this audience do or feel at the end of this conversation? And it's always a conversation, but what needs to happen at the end? And the less it's about you, and the more like you get yourself together, you regulate yourself, figure out your techniques, which we talk about in the Catalyst Academy. You can also Google some of these things. You own those unique parts of you, and then you focus on changing that audience and impacting and transforming them. That takes a lot of it. It's not overnight. It takes some time, but you have to get used to and accept that it's a process and it's an exchange that's happening. It's not about like people being like, you are good. It's just like, how can you exchange some energy with these people? So
I love that so very much. And I think that taking the pressure off yourself, perfectionism, taking the pressure off yourself, it's not about what you walk away with. It's about what they're walking away with. And it doesn't need to be perfect for them to walk away with something. Even more so, oftentimes when it's not perfect is when you walk away with more. because you get to be a human being in the room with that person. And so it's so interesting. One of the things, I had such a hard time in my entrepreneurial journey moving from the marketer, the person that's so used to amplifying and shining a light on everybody else, and then using my name. It's a very terrifying, scary thing for me. I have a history in my life with a very abusive dynamic in my life where it was narcissism from a very young age, from 5 years old until he passed when I was 20. So I had a very big fear around somebody that took up a lot of space and used that platform to feed themselves and not to feed everybody else. And so it was a really interesting experience. And the biggest thing that actually shifted that for me, and I'm hearing this so much in what you just said, was viewing yourself as a vessel for the message that you're intended to put out in the world, rather than viewing yourself as successful or not based on the breath that you took, the comma that is in the right space, like the volume that you like, all the little tiny things that if you're focusing on them, you're losing your ability to actually connect with the message that you're intended to bring out into the world. And so that idea of honoring and allowing that vessel that you are in, that you were meant to be, it was decided before you were here. And like, you can't break that. You can't ruin that. So just honoring it and allowing you to show up through that in the best way you know possible. And again, on this constant journey of getting closer and honoring ourselves through that healing and transformation, it's amazing to watch. And again, I am not somebody that is getting to see people perform after, right? Getting to hear about their ability to public speak and get that testimonial feedback. Cause that's what if you're a speaker and you're not getting testimonies, get them back. But like having the ability to have the work that you're doing be set up in such a way that you can actually see the transformation for people at when you start all the way to when you're done. And even afterwards, that they can come back and say, here's the experience that I have. I feel like that is like, if only, again, I always think about this too, if only we had schooling that mapped the things that we need, because we learned about geometry, right? And it would have been much better for them, me as a me as a student as well, to have Rhonda come in and to talk to you about how important it is for you to understand and know and honor your voice. If that was part of your schooling instead of the tangent, cosine, sine, when am I using that? Right?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So I am so grateful. And also I need you to know there's so many people that I work with that are like, so do you know anybody that could help? And I'm like, yep, I do. All right. So I feel like it was funny. I was having a conversation last week about the fact that like, there's this whole squad, I feel like, of us that are coming together as the Avengers vibes into the unknown and the gray area of what we're walking into as a society. And I feel like it's the Captain Planet. I don't know if you remember that. That we join forces together to create this space where it's like, actually, let's re-educate ourselves and honor the things that we've known about ourselves, but we've been told to minimize. The things that we've put English, history, math, and science above. Let's take some time, make some space, and like fortify that level of education about ourselves so we can have that foundation moving forward. So I am so excited because I know what you're doing. And also I have this like I feel like a psychic nudge of the fact that like, there's so much coming, like, so much coming. So I am just so excited to be able to bear witness. And for those of you in the audience, if you haven't gone to Instagram and followed Rhonda, like go. If you haven't subscribed to her podcast, do that now. I want to hear a little bit like, how can people find you? What was the best way for them to get and connect with you? Because I mean, if you're listening to this and you don't want to, I don't know what's going on, but go connect with Rhonda.
Well, I'm on Instagram and Twitter at It's Simply Speech, like It's Simply Speech. And LinkedIn, Rhonda Khan, and you can come to my website, simplyspeechsolutions.com. My podcast is coming back, Oversharing with Rhonda. It has its own Instagram as well. You can check out episodes and binge those as well. And reach out and say hi. I love to talk to people.
Yes. Well, Rhonda and I started this before we got on the recording, being so excited to see each other. So when she says she likes to talk to people, she's not joking. I am just so grateful that you came here today and joined me. I am so excited for all of you that have listened and gotten to know Rhonda, because like light in this world right here, right now. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Nikki. It's been a pleasure.
Oof. How wonderful is Rhonda? My goodness. I'm just so grateful that we met each other and that we had such a wonderful conversation. It brought my spirits up so much, and I hope it did for you as well. I want to just take a minute and one, celebrate that we have interviews back. Sorry, it's the second week, but I'm just so excited. 2 interviews in a row and 2 incredible humans. If you haven't listened to the interview with Lucia Robinson Griggs, I encourage you to go do that. It was so much fun. And I just wanted to encourage you, if you're listening to this episode and you're listening to these conversations and you have something that you want us to be talking about, we want to know. If there's something that really resonated with you, or something that did not resonate with you, or something you have questions on, or a topic you want to hear more about, or you want to hear fresh from us, let us know. So you can go over to nikkyinnocent.com/join the conversation, and you can let us know there. You can go over to Instagram too and send us a message in our direct messages just to let us know if there's anything there too. Me and my team are in there. So a little bit of logistics. Next week, we will be coming back with a solo episode. And then after that, we will have another interview. So we're going to be doing about every other week with the interviews. And I love it because interviews and talking to people are the things that light me up. I mean, I could talk all day, but it's so much more fun when I get to talk to someone else. So I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week ahead. I just want you to know how grateful I am that you bring your time, your ears, and your energy to this podcast. It means so much, especially right now. Time, energy, and even our ears are being used to process so much information and to stay as put together as possible in a time that's really testing us. So just know that I see you, I feel you, and I'm grateful. I am grateful that you were here, and I can't wait for the next episode next week. Have a wonderful week, my friends.